Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got volume 6 of Ask the Nick, which is my series of videos where I just answer viewer questions. And I've got a bunch of viewer questions, more than I can do today. So if you've asked yours and I responded, I know about it, it's on the list, I just haven't gotten around to it yet. And feel free to leave more questions down in the comments there below. So the very first question that I'm going to go into today is by my buddy Electric Tactical. He asks, could you briefly go over what you think of different blade finishes, like stonewashed, mirror, satin, hand finished, bead blasted? Yeah, sure. Honestly, I don't have very strong opinions about blade finish, except at the extremes. I tend to prefer a blade which has some degree of polish to it. Something like this. This is a J. Kobach Quieback. Review is going to be coming up eventually here. I don't really care for the acid wash finish on this. It's stonewashed and then acidified, and to me this always feels a little tiny bit dirty. I don't know. And especially like a bead blast finish doesn't tend to do it for me. I prefer something that's got a nice polish so I can feel like I can really get it clean. But, you know, and at the same time, though, a mirror finish can be problematic. Something like on your Rocksteads or other mirror finish blades, it's very easy to scratch that blade up and then it'll show those scratches forever. If the steel is hard enough, it's not generally a concern, but I do prefer something that doesn't show that much wear. So for me, I think the happiness is someplace in the medium. Something along the lines of a stonewash sort of satin blade, or even just a plain stonewash without the acid going on. Any of those sorts of things are a beautiful thing. In terms of my personal favorite finishes, I do love the Grimsmo Norseman blade finish, which is just stonewashed. But it has this really cool stepping pattern from the milling, which initially I thought was really silly, but has grown on me a great deal. But more specifically, my absolute favorite finish is this guy on the Spyderco Sleesh Bowie. This is sort of a mirror stonewash. Well, I think they stonewashed it and then mirror polished on top of that. And it's absolutely gorgeous, and I love this finish so damn much. I wish I could see it on everything. So, like I said, I guess I'm not a huge true believer in any one finish, but I do like something with a little bit of polish, but not altogether too much. I hope that's interesting and helpful there, Tactical. Great question. So the bearded bassist asks, hey Nick, what's your favorite scale material? Honestly, it's probably going to be titanium. The knives I love most in this world are all titanium on both sides. And that's not because I'm a hard use kind of guy, because I actually need the titanium, but there's something reassuring about having a knife that is entirely metallic. That brings me some joy, and the extra weight, especially when it's well done, is not a big problem for me generally. So I tend to prefer all metal rather than G10 and something like that. However, that said, carbon fiber is a really good close second. This is the Shirogorov Hati in carbon fiber, and you can see that this half of the knife is entirely carbon fiber. And sure, there's some penalty in strength, and would I like to see a little titanium skeletonized liner? Yeah, probably, but at the same time, this is damn good, and it's more than strong enough for anything I'm ever gonna do. I'm way oversensitive about, well, that should really have metal underneath there. And I shouldn't be, because what the heck am I doing, really? But carbon fiber is probably second place, and then more traditional materials, probably a polished micarta. When it's done well, it can be a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so, yeah, I guess that's my third place. Great question. Thanks, bearded bassist. So Jason asks, what's your least favorite popular knife and why? Well, I'll give two answers there. The first is the Chris Reeves Sebenza. I don't obviously have one, so I can't put it on camera. But to me, the ergonomics just don't fit whatsoever. There's a lot to love there, and, you know, it can be a great knife, and Chris Reeves Knives makes great products. But for me, it just doesn't scratch the itch. I'm one of like 3 people in the knife world who's not in love with the Sebenza. It's life, whatever. The other option would be the Benchmade Griptilian line. I really dislike the plastic handle. There's a lot to love with these knives, with the Griptilian, 100%. Great knives in a lot of ways, but the thing is, at the end of the day, they're just not for me. They're a little thick, they're a little chubby. I got a review coming up of this guy before too long here. Thank you for my buddy Jim sending this along. But I don't love the Griptilians. And so, no matter how often I try, even the new G10 version with the 20CV, great knife on paper, just doesn't do it for me. So those two, the Sebenza and the Benchmade Griptilian line, are my least favorite popular knives. Sorry about that to all the people who absolutely love them. Great question. So Randy Kelly asks, so Nick, what's your favorite knife of all time? I've been pretty explicit that the Norseman's my favorite knife, although this guy's, the Shirogorov Neon is coming up close second these days. But I figured I'd break it out a little bit. My favorite production knife is going to be Spyderco Sleesh Bowie. It's just so damn good. All the details are there, and what they've set out to do, they've done damn near perfectly. And so, in that way, this absolutely wins my favorite production knife prize. Favorite mid-tech knife, or limited production, I don't like the term mid-tech, I'll make a video about that, is going to be this guy, the Shirogorov Neon, which has just this absolutely stellar, incredible action, and is just an incredible functional cutting tool. I've been carrying this guy more than anything else lately, because it's just so damn good. And then my favorite custom knife, although again, the Norsemans are a little strange for custom, I guess they're all custom, numbered and whatnot, is the Grimsmo Norseman here, and it is still my favorite knife just because everything they've done perfectly. And the mechanism on this guy is just so astoundingly good. So, yeah, those are my three favorites, my favorite in each category. Good question there, Randy. So Minnesota Knife Guy asks, do you ever carry more than one knife or EDC a backup blade? Honestly, no. I don't really use my knives hard enough that one's likely to break and I'll need another one. Usually I have my Leatherman in my pack alongside the knife that's in my pocket, but I just don't have enough need for that. And I'm not doing the whole self-defense thing, so if they steal my one knife in a fight, I'm already dead. Let's just be real here. The other time when you might carry two knives is if you need one that's designed for work and one that's designed for people who are scared of things. So, like, for instance, you might carry something big and beefy like your Shirogorov Hati for really getting stuff down out in the wilderness, the job site, whatever. And you might carry this little guy, Spyderco Dragonfly, so that no one's scared of it. Generally, I just stick to something that's medium-sized, like the Shirogorov Neon or the Chris Reeve Tie-Lock. Neither of these are going to get people too good and scared. And if I absolutely need to carry something bigger, I'll just be a little circumspect with it. And, you know, wait until no one else is in the room to cut open the soup, or whatever the heck that is if I'm carrying something big. But honestly, that's just not a big concern for me. I know it is for a lot of people, and the idea of a traditional knife and something that's bigger, tacticaler, it's not a term, but I guess it is now, coupled with something small and traditional works out really well, but that's just not something I generally need to do. It'd be nice, though, for review if I did more often carry multiple knives, but just doesn't make sense for me. Anyways, great question. So Minnesota Knife Guy also asks, is there a brand you've always wanted to try, but you've held back for some reason? Yeah, actually, for me that would be Medford Knife and Tool. Medford makes really kind of overbuilt, but fairly simple and, from what I hear, pretty excellent frame locks. But the thing is, a couple of years back, well, maybe not that long ago, I stumbled upon a thread on the Reddit, the Knife Club over there, basically showing the letter that comes with a Medford knife. And I since looked at an actual Medford knife and saw this actual letter. And it really put me off of the brand, and I've gone ahead and printed it off from that thread here. And I'll just get some highlights for you here. Most knife returns are caused by mishandling of the blade by a customer. So we thought we would save you the hassle by offering strong recommendations. Do not use any tools on your knife for any reason, no exceptions. So, okay, you can't disassemble and maintain the blade. That's strike one. Do not lubricate your knife in any way, no exceptions. Let it break in. So, okay, break in, yeah, that's fine. And I can understand not wanting unsanctioned lubrication. That might cause some people to have trouble. But you can be a little bit kinder about it. Do not get oil in the handle or the pivot area or anywhere near the lock face. Frame locks are friction dependent. Oil kills friction, so your blade will not lock and may close on your fingers. Really? That's not how most frame locks work. You can put oil on the lock face and the lock will still work. It's kind of an interesting statement there. I don't see it. New folders with titanium lock sides need to be handled carefully when new. If you begin your own round of failure testing on your lock, you will damage the knife. This is what we do, and we are experts at it. Okay, so you're saying that the locks are really fragile to start with. Again, that's not been my experience with most frame locks, but maybe yours are very, very special. Don't have somebody else work and modify on your knife. Its warranty will be destroyed. We've never seen an aftermarket modification that took into account the design for functionality and didn't decrease the value. If you want man jewelry, go buy a ring. Okay, thank you. And then finally, no throwing. Okay, I'm with you completely. But the thing is, this letter just, to me, smacks of a lack of confidence in the product he's putting out. I don't love it. Because it's just like, okay, if you're that scared of the knife being injured just by everyday use, you might want to change those design elements. If your lock, for whatever reason, is completely unable to cope with a little bit of oil on the face of it, there may be a problem with your lock. Similarly, if your knife is so hard to disassemble that only Greg Medford himself can do it, that's a problem with the knife itself. And the fact that there are plenty of really good manufacturers out there who are very happy to let you do all of these things just makes me feel like, why would I go here? Why would I buy a knife that Greg Medford thinks is this damn fragile? And so, considering he's selling sort of hard-use tools, and that's his whole ethos, this just strikes me as kind of bad in many ways. So every time I get myself thinking, oh man, that looks really good, I should pick that up, I just read the letter, and I let Greg Medford go on ahead and talk me out of buying one of his knives. And so it's sad, but it's true. And yeah, I guess there you go. So yeah, that's the brand that I've always wanted to try, but I've always held back for some reason. Good question there, Minnesota Knife Guy. Hope it was interesting. So Alex Ramos asks, Nick, what languages do you speak and to what proficiency? Okay, sure. I speak English, like is spoken in the US of A, where this knife is made. Although some people would probably disagree with the fact that I speak English after listening to me talk. That's okay. Some days I disagree with my speaking English. I also am pretty fluent in the Spanish. I just picked that up growing up, and it's been helpful. I'm representing Spanish here by this knife because it has a really spectacular Ano job on it there. I love that blue. Sorry, couldn't resist. I do have some Russian in me, although I'm losing it pretty quick there. I don't speak it very often, so it's going away. But it's in there someplace, like Yashirogorov Hati has got some Russian in there someplace. And then finally, I got some other languages just kicking around a little tiny bit. I got a little bit of French, a little bit of German here with the Sin 104. I got a couple others around. But for the most part, I'm happy in English, and I'm pretty happy in Spanish, but everything else is rapidly fading away. I also do speak some programming languages, although I don't use them very often out in general public. If you start talking to the cashier in Python, they're not going to understand you. So, yeah, there you go, Alex. Hope that was interesting. Falcon Polling asks, have you ever given any of your knives names? No, not generally. I mean, my car's got a name, and some other things in my lives do. But, you know, honestly, this is the only knife that's got a name. This is named Stan. And it's named Stan after a friend of our family, a guy named Stan, obviously. And he was a heck of a guy, and very interesting. He was unquestionably hardcore. He was in Vietnam. He saw some shit, did some shit. And I know a lot of it he struggled with for a long time. He then came back and worked security for the U.S. government and worked in places like nuclear facilities, and was involved in a fire at one of those nuclear facilities that, you know, he saved lives. And this is not a little, I saved lives. No, like, this is legit. Like, there have been articles and books written about this. He saved some freaking lives. A real hero guy. Then after that, he got out of the nuclear field after getting his exposure and moved on to be the warden of a jail. But the thing is, even with all of this hardcore in him, he was still a really kind human. He didn't seem to like violence at all. He was hardcore and he wasn't going to take any crap, but he always did his best to seem to avoid that. And I always respected that fact, that he had those two in such balance, that he was kind, he was helpful, he was a good person to have around, and was just a genuinely nice guy, but he had all that with him still. And so Stan died a few years back of a heck of a cancer after the nuclear fire. Never quite got acknowledged, but that's what it is. And so when I picked up a Delica, I decided to name it in his honor, because he carried a pair of Delicas with him, at least when I knew him, one serrated and one plain edge, and it always stuck with me, and so that seemed like a fitting way to honor him. So this Delica is named Stan, and if I get another Delica in the future, if this one goes away for some reason, it too will become named Stan. So this is Stan the Delica, and Stan the guy was a heck of a man. I hope that was interesting, and great question there, Falcon. So Toad Sticker, who is a longtime viewer and a regular YouTube reviewer himself, asks, did you ever buy a knife that got a great review from one of the big-time reviewers like Nut and Fancy or Toad Sticker, just to be dissatisfied when you got it? Well, first of all, nice plug. Second of all, Yeah, of course. For instance, a lot of people love the cold steel broken skull, and I kind of panned it. There's a lot to love there, but that's more a matter of taste. For me, parts of that knife were completely unacceptable that I think other people just didn't have a problem with, namely the name and that whole aesthetic. But that's more a matter of taste. There are other knives, too, that people have loved that I've really not loved, the Inkosi, but that's an ergonomic thing, and that's person-specific. A better example to me is actually the Chris Reeve tie lock. This is a knife that the reviews on the YouTube when I got it were fundamentally mixed. Some people really liked it and thought it was a good EDC option. Some people really hated it and thought it was absolutely just terrible. And the lack of, well, the lack of a good consensus in the review community kept me from buying this knife a lot longer than it did. And some of the reviews, or in fact all of the reviews, didn't quite answer the questions I wanted to know, like can you open and close the damn thing one-handed? The answer, by the way, is yes. And never showed things like that. And so had I watched my review of the tie lock earlier, I would have done it way earlier. Of course, that would have required a time machine, and I don't have one of those. But nonetheless, it's something to keep in mind. So the tie lock is actually one of those things that makes me keep doing this, because I figure if I can help somebody who was in my position to make a good purchase or to avoid a bad one, then I feel like I'm doing some weird little bit of good in the world. But yeah, I'm always going to disagree with people. Reviews are personal, and if you're looking at my reviews as some arbitration of the perfect truth of the universe, oh, by God, are you going to be disappointed. I'm just some random jackass with my own preferences and opinions, just like every other random jackass out there on YouTube or otherwise. So, there you go. Good question there, Toad Sticker, and again, well done with the plug. So, Matt SXC asks, what's your favorite beverage, Nick? I'm embarrassed to admit this, but in terms of volume, honestly, it's probably Diet Mountain Dew. And I know, it's toxic. I shouldn't drink anything that color. It's bad in every way. I once asked Whole Foods if they had Diet Mountain Dew, not knowing what a Whole Foods was, and I got a look from the cashier like I just lit a cat on fire. It was spectacular. But anyways, it's inexpensive, it gets me caffeine, there's a vending machine at my work, which makes a lot of money off of me, let's just be real here. And it's probably going to be what kills me, but something's got to kill me, right? But in terms of actual beverages that I really enjoy, I'm a big fan of root beers, cream sodas, and birch beers, things like that. A ginger beer can be good too. But any of these kinds of things are just incredible because the taste is there. It's just with a little bit of extra sassafras. Oh yeah, that's the way to go. So I guess by volume, probably Diet Mountain Dew, but by taste, probably a really good high-end root beer is gonna be my top of the line. Good question there, Matt. So Chem Millick asks, what do you think about Boker knives? They seem to be all over the place. It's the only major knife manufacturer I can't get a handle on in terms of what to expect. And honestly, you're kind of on the right track there. As far as I'm concerned, Boker is a company with absolutely no filter. They will produce some really great knives, like your Excalibur 1 here. They will produce some okay knives, like your Kwaiken here. The Urban Trapper is another pretty great knife. But they also produce some knives that are just terrible, and that never should have. It's not that they shouldn't have left the factory, it's that they shouldn't have left the design desk. Like somebody should have said, wait a second, you want to make what? But they never did. And so they're producing all of these things, and the quality control is pretty iffy as well. So you end up with a company that's just cranking out knife after knife after knife, and some of them are pretty decent, some of them are just terrible. If somebody says, if a knife retailer says, oh, Nick, we're going to send you a random ZT, like, hey, great. And by the way, this doesn't happen, but if they were to, I'd be pretty excited. The worst case scenario is it's one I already have, but they're all pretty much okay. Same thing with, for instance, Spyderco. By and large, although they've got a couple of misses here and there, by and large, they're pretty reasonable. But with Boker, if they said, we're going to send you a random Boker, it's like, oh, well, okay. Yeah, sure, I guess. Because it could be something great, and it could be something that's just awful. So I guess that's my take on Boker, is you can't really have a take on Boker itself, because it's just too big. There's a lot of crap, there's a lot of decent stuff, and there's some good stuff in there. But they don't bother to sort it out, and that's almost kind of a shame. But great question there. I hope that was helpful, and as I get more experience, maybe I'll do a full-on Nick's take on Boker knives, but for the moment, I think that just kind of suffices. So Kevola asks, what's the best budget-friendly Wharncliffe blade? So a Wharncliffe blade is a blade where the cutting edge is straight. So something like on the Cold Steel Tough Light here, or on your Graham Razel. And it's a beautiful knife design. And there's a whole lot of good coming out of Wharncliffe blades. I'm a big fan. The best budget-friendly one is almost certainly this guy, the Cold Steel Tough Light. This made it to the final four of the very best pocket knife, budget pocket knife Thrifty Thursday challenge. And there's a lot of good here. It's a cold steel, which is itself a little bit on the ugly side, as I've described, I think, in Ask the Nick number 4, maybe 3. But, you know, it's good, it's ergonomic, there's not a whole lot to hate here. So I would say this is going to be a best budget Wharncliffe knife. The Kershaw Leak is another decent option. It's assisted. I don't have one, but I've had one in the past. It's assisted, and it's kind of it's a little more sheep's footy maybe, but it is kind of a Wharncliffe-y shape, and there's a lot of good there as well, and it's kind of a step up in terms of materials there. And, you know, beyond that, there are a whole bunch of options for you. But I'd say start at the Tough Light if you're after a Wharncliffe blade. Good question, Cavola. So Arthur Leyenberger asks, do you think Chris Reeve knives will ever make a flipper? Maybe, is the only real question I can answer there. Chris Reeve Knives is an American company, obviously, very traditional, very conservative, if you will. Came up with the frame lock, but a lot of their designs tend to be they're on the bleeding edge of manufacturing, but not on the bleeding edge in terms of features. And so it doesn't shock me that they haven't made one up until now. And also Chris Reeve has expressed kind of a disdain for flicking the knife open. He feels like that's abusive to the knife, and so I can see why it hadn't happened yet. But Chris Reeve has actually stepped down now, and now it's being run by his family, and maybe they'll be a little softer on that. What I will say is that I hope that if they make a flipper, they do it really well. And I suspect they will if they keep that ethos going, but I hope that they don't rush into it and suddenly just, oh, we're going to do a flipper, and it's a half-baked gesture, because doing a flipper right, getting the detent really dialed in, is not easy. And so I hope that they really do take their time and make something truly excellent with it, instead of just another kind of, oh, hey, we made a titanium frame lock flipper too. I hope they do one that is damn near perfect, because that would be great. I've also heard rumors that the tie lock was originally meant to be a flipper. It's running on bearings here, and this would actually make a lot of sense as a knife with a flipper tab, with this lockup mechanism. I would like that a lot, but at the end of the day, that got squashed. So I don't know how true that is. Maybe commenters, if you know whether that is true, that the tie lock was designed to be a flipper but turned out not to be, please let me know. Or if I'm full of crap, let me know down there too. But either way, I hope they do eventually, but I hope they do it right, and that they stick true to their roots of incredible quality and real perfection before they go ahead and do that. Great question. So Justin Washu O'Brien asks, hey Nick, how do you fix a frame lock that jams the blade open? The lock is ending up on the far side of the tang. So this can happen particularly on lower quality frame locks, but where the lock bar has moved all the way over and is jammed over here someplace, so that you cannot open the knife, you cannot close the knife, you can't move the lock bar back over. The answer to that, unfortunately, is you send it back to the manufacturer. The reason I'm as quick about that is that I really do believe that there are safety devices in the world that you probably shouldn't mess with unless you're really, really familiar with them. Things like the seatbelts or the airbag in your car. Things like the electrical breaker system in your house. Things like the ground fault, the ground fault indicator in your bathroom, that ground fault protection that makes sure that if you drop the hairdryer into the bathtub, you don't die. Those little things like that, the things that keep you from dying or losing limbs or losing fingers, are not something you should dick around with unless you are very, very experienced at dicking around with them. If you're an electrician, sure, have at it. And so I feel the same way about the locks and folding knives. I very much am in favor of taking apart and maintaining knives, and you can certainly do things like putting a little Sharpie on the lock face to reduce stick, and things like that. But when people talk about, oh, I'm just going to regrind the lock face a little bit, I'm like, oh, hold on now there, champion, because it's very easy to do something that results in the lockup being insecure, and thus in the knife closing on your fingers. And I like my fingers. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a big fan of these. They're useful for, eating and manipulating knives on a YouTube channel. And so, that's kind of where I land. There's a lot you can do to your knife, and there's a lot you can repair on your own knife, but when it comes time to fixing the lockup, I think it's really best to send it back to the person who designed it so that they'll do it right for damn sure. Maybe I'm a wimp, maybe I'm scared, but that's the one area that I draw the line in. So Hopefully that helps for you, Justin. Sorry I don't have quick and easy advice for you. So the final question is not so much a question as an address a common pattern or issue that people seem to have. Very often I will get comments on the YouTube or on the Instagram or just the emails or something like that asking, hey Nick, I'm looking at some random knife, the Kershaw Sprang. That doesn't exist, but I probably will in a year or so. Is it a gem? And then I have two answers to that. Either, well, go ahead and look on my channel. I've got a review for that already. Always Google the channel, by the way, before you do that. And the other answer is, I don't know. And people tend to get a little bit snippy when it's like, well, come on, you have to have some opinion. But the thing is, I really don't like to give an opinion until I've had a chance to handle the knife. Because there have been knives that I thought I was going to love and turned out really not to. The Chris Reeve Incosi is a perfect example of this. I thought this was the perfect knife for me, but then I handled it, and the ergonomics were all off, and it just didn't make all that much sense. The Shirogorov F95 is another knife that, on paper, was absolutely stellar, but in practice, didn't stick around. Hinderer XM18 Wharncliffe should have checked all the boxes, but when I actually handled it, realized it didn't. And even some really high-end stuff that I thought was going to be God's gift to knife-making turned out not to be what I was after. Got some of those reviews coming up here soon. There are other things, though, on the other side that I thought I was going to hate. For instance, the Spyderco Rubicon is a knife that I'd always kind of laughed off, like, oh yeah, sure, like anyone's going to buy that. What the? I didn't get it. And then I handled one, I was like, holy crap, I like this. I like this a lot. And that really shocked me. Or the Spyderco PM2. I'd handled one previously and just thought that's a lot of handle for not much blade, and I was handling it in the store with the crappy action over-tightened and whatnot. Now I realize there's a lot of good here. The Rat 2, I figured I would pick it up, make a review of, oh, look at this cheap piece of crap knife. Turns out it's a really great knife. And then the Z-Hunter, I thought I was going to hate, but it has found a special place in my heart. But that's a separate affair, really. So, I just don't know, looking at a spec sheet online or a couple of pictures or the pre-order, whether it's going to be worth a damn or not. And I'm sure as heck not willing to call something a gem or junk on the basis of that. So, if you want to know my opinion on something, you're welcome to ask, and if enough people are asking for something, I might try and pick one up used. But at the end of the day, unless I've actually had a chance to look at it, I just don't feel comfortable giving a strong opinion, because I just don't know. And that's kind of how I got to work. So that's why I try and do so many reviews, so I got lots of data for you guys. Anyways, I hope this whole thing has been interesting, and if you got further questions, just drop them in the comments down here, or shoot them to me on the Instagram, whatever you'd like, and probably easiest if you do it here. And, have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day.